And we are back. We had a little hiatus, but Catching Connor with Jack and Nibs is back. So I am Jack, and Mr. I Told You So. My guy Nibs is here with me. So, we've been out for a little bit, but how does it feel, to be back at it, doing our thing?
And it's always good to run it back with you, Jack. You know, we got to get in here and get going, and we got a lot to talk about, baby. It's
Just
been some business happening since we was away.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, a lot of it we'll talk about last week's fights. We'll get into some recent news that came up, press conference stuff. So you guys can all see it in the title and description now, but we'll get to all of it. Any questions or anything you guys have, you guys can drop those in the chat and we'll be sure to answer those too. So we'll get whatever you guys want us to talk about. But the first thing we'll definitely touch on is Emmanuel Navarrete and Oscar Valdez had a highly anticipated fight last weekend. It was billed as one of those Mexico versus Mexico fights. A lot of people compared it to Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera. And I think the action we got in that fight was on the level, but I don't think it was as competitive as I think those fights or as people anticipated it would be. For me, being someone who picked Valdez to win, and I picked Valdez to win by knockout, I think Navarrete really, really impressed me. We've seen him kind of be up and down before, especially the fight that we all streamed with me, you, and Felix when it was Liam Wilson against Navarrete, and he was dropped in that fight and was really hurt. It was down on the scorecards before the stoppage, but he was in prime form last Friday night or Saturday night. So, what'd you think about Emmanuel Navarrete putting in the work on Oscar Valdez?
That man has earned every accolade he's getting right now, bro. But I'm gonna tell you, the fight didn't, like you said, the fight for me didn't disappoint. You want to see guys just, if you want to see high level rock'em sock'em robots, bro, watch that fight. If you haven't seen it, find it somewhere. It was on ESPN. Pretty sure if you have ESPN Plus, you can get it, restream it. It's probably on YouTube somewhere by now. Find that fight. This is, again, we talk about, if you want to introduce somebody to boxing who's never seen any fights before, putting that fight on in front of them probably wouldn't be a bad idea, bro, because you'd probably get a fan pretty quick. Um, I can nitpick and say Valdez's performance was it underwhelmed for me because I expected so much more. I'm a huge Valdez fan, as I think a lot of people are, because of the style of fight he has. He never really, you know, even in his loss, he didn't disappoint. You know what I mean? He always gives you his heart. He's always throwing balls to the wall, and he sleeps people. That man doesn't get TKOs; he gets KOs. There's a difference. There's levels to this game, as we were talking about in the pre-show. So I want to, hats off to both of them. They came in there. They gave, I mean, the guys who were there live said, the fans was on their feet from round one, bro. So, hats off to him. But Navarrete, bro, I got a whole new respect for him. It was damn near a shutout for me. I had it 9-3, and I gave Valdez 3 rounds, if I'm being honest. I could see 8-4 if you like accuracy, but just the pure volume of punches, Navarrete was on his shit.
Yeah, I think when I was watching live, I felt like the 10-2 and 11-1 scorecards might have been a bit wide, but I think then looking back and first of all, even just seeing the face of two guys, you can never judge a fight just on damage either. But Navarrete looked like he was like you said in the pre-show too. He looked like he was getting in the ring, getting ready to fight in the post-fight show. And Valdez, you saw his eye was shut. You saw he took a lot of punishment. So it's not like Navarrete wasn't touched up at all. He was hit, but no effects on his body at all. And then he was just constantly outworking Valdez too. Valdez, I thought, kind of fell in love with his power. I think he knew what he did against Burt Shelton. He kind of thought it would, just like I did, I thought it would be a similar kind of fight, but Navarrete never gave him, or Valdez never landed the shot to kind of change the course of the fight either. And if you're not able to do that against a guy like Navarrete, he's just going to keep coming downhill, and it's going to be hard to kind of overcome that.
I mean, you said it, bro. Navarrete looked like he was getting ready to go to the club. The boy was fresh. Didn't look like he had a mark on him. And when you consider you're fighting a guy who's a knockout artist in Valdez, and you can say that, man, he was just walking through the punches, like you said. So I don't need to see it again. I know a lot of people were hyping it up for a trilogy. They had Morales and Barrera in the in the crowd, and they were hyping it up this whole week. We got a really good fight. I think damn near fight of the year. It's going to be in the running, but I don't need to see it again. Unless Valdez comes back and annihilates somebody and Navarrete struggles again, or maybe Valdez gets a belt, some shit like that. Then we can have that conversation. But right now, I'm good with it. I'm good with it being a one and done. And I think Valdez needs to take time off anyway, bro. I think he needs to chill out for a minute, rest, heal up, and I'm still. I know some people were saying, he either needs to run it back or retire. Nah, he don't need to retire. Just take some time and get back in the ring. He's always going to be able to sell tickets.
Yeah, I think the ESPN was definitely pushing the narrative. I mean, the whole week they had Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales there, and I think even during the fight they were trying to make it a little closer than the fight actually was. I mean, I'm someone who, like I told you, I bet on Valdez to win. I bet on Valdez to win by knockout, so I was definitely looking for Valdez to do things in certain spots. I just never saw him really able to capitalize on any of those spots. I thought Navarrete's defense looked tighter than it's looked recently. I think Navarrete is kind of one of these guys, even like Juan Estrada is too, where they kind of fight to the level of their competition. So we've seen Estrada and Navarrete both when they fought guys, when they're 10 or 12 to 1 favorites and they're supposed to kill guys, they'll kind of have close fights. But when they're underdogs or they're in a 50-50 fight, we get the best of those guys. So I think that Navarrete is another one of those guys in the long line of guys who fight up or down to the level of their competition. So I think anytime he's in a big fight, I think you will see the best of Navarrete for sure.
I think that when you consider that, we're talking about a 3-division champ, you know what I'm saying? He's been pretty dominant as well. I think sky's the limit. And now it's okay, what's next? If they don't run it back, what's next for Navarrete? What's next for Valdez? Again, in my opinion, I think Valdez just needs to chill for a minute and reassess in a couple of months. I think Navarrete can pretty much call his shot, bro. You ask me.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think whether he wants to go to 135, I know that RCS Shakur Stevenson fight has been a fight that's been talked about a lot. And you know me, I'm from the New England area, so I know Abraham Nova well, so I would love to see him get that shot too. So I think at 130, that would be a great Mexican versus Puerto Rico fight. I think the styles match up really good for that. I think even if you were to move up to 135 or stay at 130 for Navarrete, I think there's options on both sides for that. For Valdez too, I agree with you. I don't think the rematch is something he should look for right away. Like I said, I know they were pushing that post-fight, but when you go back and you watch that fight, even watching the second time, I'm just not sure what else Valdez can do. I think he does this thing, and I just think his style, unless he just doesn't have the output to be able to, unless he's gonna land a big shot on him to change the course of the fight, I'm just not sure what else he can really do with that. I saw him kind of fall in the same kind of trap I think we've seen Canelo fall in with, especially in the Bivol fight, and those guys kind of become a bit predictable in their offense, and they kind of look for those looping shots. Like they know what they're looking for, but they kind of only look for those shots, and they kind of become more predictable than they should be because they're both. And even Canelo's a much better fighter than Valdez is, but I think the styles are kind of similar, and you can kind of see the similarities and kind of the limitations in their styles also against a guy who's active with output and those kind of things.
I think I think Valdez had a game plan. The game plan just failed, right? Mm-hmm. I think he thought Navarrete was going to start gassing out, which he didn't. Credit to him, right? But I think he had a game plan, and the game plan failed. And then what he didn't account for is that Navarrete has real power, bro. Once that eye was affected, you got to go back to what got you to the dance, bro. Get in there and start banging. You know what I mean? And I think he tried that a little bit too late. I think he tried to, switch back into, warrior mode and just start slinging. At that point, though, I think it was too far gone. Like, I think you needed to do that from the jump. Not to say that we didn't get an entertaining fight, we did. But I think he should have been way more active in those middle rounds, and he just wasn't. Could part of that be that he's, hey, look, the boy's been in some wars. There's a lot of tread on those tires. Maybe it's time to, hey, not retire, but hey, maybe it's time to take a lighter touch next time
Mhm.
out. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens, but I think the game plan. You could see there was a game plan in the beginning to go to the body, try to wear him down. That shit wasn't working, bro. You got to catch Navarrete early. You know what I mean? And you got to catch him when when the sweat is still starting to build up, and they didn't do that, and they paid for it.
Yeah. Navarrete is like some of those other typical Mexican fighters too. When you see him at the weigh-in, he almost seems out of shape. He doesn't have the six-pack. He looks kind of flat. But then when you get into the fight, Oscar Valdez is landing some of those body shots. He's landing the big shots, but they never affected Navarrete. He didn't gas like we've seen him do in other fights or kind of fight in spurts. Navarrete was all gas, no breaks from the opening bell. So it just shows once again that just because a guy looks like he's not in shape doesn't mean that he's not in shape. And just because a guy looks like they're in great shape doesn't mean they're in great shape. Everybody's body is different. So we've seen that. I think this was another example of that. Even for Valdez too, I think we can both agree that we wanted more from him performance-wise and stylistically wise, but I don't think we'd both agree with this. And anybody who watched the fight would agree that there's nothing else you could have asked for Valdez as far as heart-wise. I mean, you saw a guy who took a lot of punishment, took shot after shot, had his eye not even damn near closed. His eye was closed by the end of the fight, and he never stopped coming forward, even when he clearly knew that, okay, I'm not really hurting this guy. I'm down big on the scorecards. He knew that he didn't look to take a way out, like you said, or anything like that. He kept going from the first belt to the 12th belt. So I think win, lose, or draw, I think that's why Valdez has such a strong fan base and why his fan base will continue to support him too, because he never backs down.
And I know I'm going to catch shit for this because I'm much more old school than a lot of people are. Hats off to the referee for not bringing the doc up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Hats off to them for not stopping the fight. Yes, fighter safety is paramount. Yeah, blah 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 blah. These dudes are warriors. They got into the ring knowing the risks, right? I like them letting him go out on his shield if he was going to go out on his shield. But I like because of who Valdez is, I think he's earned the right to keep fighting, right? If they'd have brought the doc up, they'd have probably stopped that fight, 9 or 10, because his eye was closed pretty much from there on. You know what I mean? It was closing, and then I want to say around 9 or 10, it was a wrap. So, and they could have stopped it at any point. Kudos to them for letting it go on. And like you said, I'm talking shit. I thought the boy lost 9-3, but it was an entertaining fight. Like, yeah, you lost, and it was clear that you lost, but it was also clear that you came in there to not lay down. Like, and like you said, a lot of guys, they might realize they're losing, that not, and then in rounds 9, 10, 11, 12, they kind of just go into defense mode. Let me just get out of here, you know what I mean, and collect my check. Nah, he was in there still trying to win the fight, still throwing punches. He even had a good couple of rounds at the end there. So, hats off to him. They gave us one of, arguably the best fight we've seen so far this year. You know what I mean? There's a couple of fights in there, you can argue with them, but and what about that, bro? And 2023 is showing out. Mm-hmm. We've had some good ass fights this year.
Yeah, we really have. And going back to your comment on the doctor too, I'm happy that they allowed the fight continue, but I can't say I think I am shocked that they didn't even look at him at some point. Because we've seen guys, I mean, they looked at Errol Spence after like the third round of the Bud fight. When he had been knocked down, he hadn't taken nearly the punishment at that point that Valdez had taken. So, I mean, Valdez is the guy when he fought Scott Quigg. Valdez had a broken jaw and came back and won that fight and won a world title. So I think anytime you do stuff like that, he's fought through all these things. He had the huge Burchelt knockout. You kind of build up an aura about you, and I think that probably played a role in being a fight in Arizona too. Valdez is from Arizona and probably didn't want to kind of give the home crowd or kind of go to the doctor, like you said, knowing that there's a pretty damn good chance if you go to the doctor, they do stop the fight. So at the end of the day, I'm shocked that they didn't go to the doctor, but it also allowed us to see those last few rounds. And Valdez took punishment, but he'll be back from this. It's not something that's going to end his career or anything like that. So I guess the question, you can wonder how much he has left going forward, but I don't think this is anything that will end Valdez's career or anything like that. And I do want to say just shout out to Duke in the chat. He said, "Hey Jack," and "Hey Nib." So shout out to you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for everyone for tuning in as always.
Yeah, thanks for watching Catch Encounter, the best show on ITR.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we're winners. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's really hard to say this guy is washed, right? When he was fighting a 3 division champion. Navarrete probably at some point is going to make the boxing Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? Kind of shit. So when you're fighting a guy on that level, like if he continues, the way things have been going, right? If he goes up another weight class and gets another belt, I think you first ballot his ass. But at this point, he's beaten everybody they put in front of him, right? And he's beaten some big names. And the way, the ease in which he beat Valdez, bro, it's one of those things where you kind of look at Valdez, but you also have to look at Navarrete, right? You have to give him his credit for being able to win the fight the way that he won, being able to come out as fresh-faced as he was, right? Because just about everybody else that would go in there who isn't named Shakur, you know what I mean, is probably going to get touched up a little bit. So, and like you said, yeah, I mean, maybe Navarrete's got to move up to 135 to start getting some challenges. There's a lot of money up there for him.
Yep, there is. So looking at the landscape of 130, I know Navarrete is a champion. We have Oshaki Foster, Joe Cordina, and Hector Garcia still as the other champions. Would you say right now that he is the best guy at 130? I think for me, Oshaki Foster, after his last performance, had kind of held that, but I think you can certainly make an argument. I think just based off this performance, even if I think Oshaki Foster's style could do good against Navarrete, I think I have to give Navarrete the #1 spot, not only because he beat Valdez, but how he did it. So where would you rank him amongst the champions right now at 130? Is he that top dog for you?
He is, and it's not close. Mm-hmm. As far as I'm concerned. Much love to I mean, bro, I'm a big Foster fan. I know a lot of people, for some reason, in the sport of boxing, shit on people with losses. Mm-hmm. I think Foster's got a real shot to clear out the division at some point. That's how high I am on him. But right now, Navarrete is that dude. Even with that fight he had, look, and again, kudos to, was it Liam? Liam was his name?
Yeah, Liam Wilson. His stock went up now too. When you think about it, he's a winner from last week also.
People were like, "Well, who is he?" Well, you found out who he was. Mm-hmm. Navarrete has earned the right to pump his chest out. He's earned the right to sit on the throne at 130, bro. And again, like I said, I think he can call his shot. I think he can pretty much say, "I want to fight this guy, that guy, or the third." And if he wants to move up, shit, he's got a lot of options. If he wants to stay where he is now, he's got a lot of options. Like he can pretty much call a shot. I think Foster's the future. I think Navarrete is the king right now.
Mm-hmm. Now I think for Navarrete that Shakur, it seems to be the big money fight for him at 135. But that's also not a fight he has to take right this second. He can get a few more fights, look to unify at 130 and then move up. There is a fight.
Tank is out there.
Tank even is a huge fight. Imagine that style matchup too. That'd be a great fight between him and Tank too, for sure.
And his height could give Tank some problems.
The height, the way he uses, he'd have to be careful, especially in the fight with Tank with his balance. You saw even in the fight with Valdez kind of tripping a little bit and stuff like that, just because the awkward angles he throws at. So he'd have to make sure when he throws those awkward angles, he has his feet underneath them at all times. Sometimes he lunges in and doesn't have his feet underneath them, and you definitely can't do that against a guy like Tank. But I mean, shit, it's a fight I would sign up for without a doubt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tank is too damn fast. I mean, it is what it is. But I'd love to see it. But I mean, at 135, really, like you said, you can call your shots. I mean, at 130. I could see him fighting Garcia or Cordina. I don't think the Foster fight is going to happen just yet, if I'm being honest. But I would love to see that fight, though. I would love to see that fight. I could see him trying to, unify. That seems to be the going thing now. Everybody wants to unify the belts, and that's a beautiful thing too. So maybe he does that, but I wouldn't be mad at him if he moved up to 135.
Yeah, I think
he's definitely got the size for it.
Yeah, I think the Cordina fight would be great for him for exposure too if you went over to the UK or went over to Wales to make that fight. But there is a fight at 130 with the guy who I mentioned earlier, a top ranked guy who I know pretty well. But I think him and Abraham Nova will make for a hell of a fight too. I spoke with Nova a bit even after the Navarrete fight, and he said that is a fight that he does want to have next. I know that he gave Valdez had a lot of problems, but Valdez also throws wide punches too with his hooks and his overhand shots. And I think that someone like Nova, who's just as tall, if not a bit taller than Navarrete, he also has the same reach. They're both like 72-inch arm reach, which for 130 is really, really long. I think a guy like Nova, where Nova's gonna have to watch out for the uppercuts and the kind of the lunging shots Navarrete has. But Nova's also he's very fast, he's twitchy, he has the 1-2 right down the pipe. So I think a guy stylistically like Nova, who has the straight punch ability, the athleticism, and those things could give Navarrete some issues. So I think another fight where that would be a hell of a fight too. You're talking about two guys who have big power that are both going to be hitting each other. So if he does stay at 130, without a doubt, I think that would. Obviously, I got some personal reasons why I'd want to see that fight. But even taking all that aside, I think style-wise, it would be an unbelievable fight. And if he's not going to unify, I would absolutely love that fight next for him at 130.
And it'd be a great bounce back for Nova. You know what I'm saying? Like I think you know, with his loss, I think everybody kind of looked at him like, oh well, maybe he's not ready for the big time. I think he just ran into, one of the best fighters in the world, and that shit happens. I would love to see it because for everything you just said, plus the fact that Nova's one of those guys where I think if he does get a belt, he's not letting it go, bro. He's that dude. He's like, nah, if I get a strap, he's gonna be a dog and do everything he can to keep that joint. And I think he's learned his lessons. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a fighter in their career is they take a bad L, right? It can be the worst or best thing. For the smart fighters, it's the best thing because they learn from it. They come back and they say, hey, a loss doesn't define me. And they move forward. They get some belts and go on and get their bag. I would love to see Nova get in there. I don't know if he's ready for Navarrete yet, but I'll be damned if I wouldn't watch that shit. Look, I might pay them to watch that fight like that.
Yeah, no, I would love that. And even he took the loss to Robesi, but that was also at 126. He was killing himself to make that weight. I know for a fact, even he's told me just how hard that weight cut was. So even he fought Adam Lopez. He got a big win, scored a few knockdowns earlier this year. Had a huge knockout over Jonathan Romero, former Olympian, former world champion, just a few weeks ago. So I think we've seen a bigger, stronger version of Abraham at 130. So I do think that would be, I think, the perfect fight for both guys next. So we'll have to see. I know top ranks behind both those guys. Makes all the sense in the world, but sometimes that's not enough in boxing. So we got to hope for that.
And Nova's power is real, bro. That's a thing. Like if you're a fighter in or around 130, 135, 126, you don't want to fight a guy like him. You know what I'm saying? Because technically speaking, you don't have to yet. You know what I'm saying? And it's dangerous. That's what cues you with Nova. But man, he's one of those guys. I'd like to see him get a shot at anybody with a strap at 130. To be honest with you, but that Navarrete joint, it would be another one of those fireworks from the first round, bro.
Yeah, and that's a fight he's wanted for a while. That's originally why he actually went down to 126 because that's when Navarrete was the champion there. So that was the fight he was chasing at that time. Mexico, Puerto Rico, they're both Spanish speakers too. I think it would be you'd be able to sell the hell out of that fight. Abraham knows how to promote. He's got the mascot and all those kind of things. Navarrete clearly is.
I love that.
Yeah, Navarrete hasn't. Yeah, Nah, it's awesome too. But Navarrete's name has never been bigger before either, so I think this would be the perfect time. I think you'd get the best version now of both those guys. Where at 126, maybe you would have had both those guys were kind of struggling to make the weight, looking to move up. At 130, I think you get the biggest, strongest, and best version of both those guys, and it'd be a fantastic fucking fight. And I pray to the boxing gods that we can get that.
Here's a flip to that, right? Maybe we get that fight because somebody's saying to themselves, hey, we got this young stud over here who's, really good at selling fights, but he's probably not ready for us yet. It'll be food for Navarrete. And they throw him in there with him and get more than they bargain for. You understand? That shit happens all the time too. So maybe we get that fight because now Navarrete is a little overconfident, because of what happened in the Valdez fight. So there could be that part of it too, and maybe that's how Nova gets in there. Hey, I like it, Jack.
Yeah, bro. I hope so because I think Navarrete and his team, but they'd fuck around and find out a little bit if that fight does happen. So,
bro,
let's get. I'm smiling just thinking about that fight. So I know that I'm gonna be up in the gym with those guys. I'll probably see Abraham again this week. So I'm sure that'll be something we talk about for sure. So hope to God we can get it without a doubt.
And tell him that's my guy. I was rocking with that dude when he was on them ESPN cards before, the Robeisy fight. I was like, yo, that's my guy. I thought he was gonna beat Robeisy. I picked him to win that fight. Oh, I was devastated when he lost, bro.
Yeah. You were rocking with him even before the first time I met you. Before you even knew that I had any connection with him, you were saying how you were a fan of him. So I will, without a doubt, he already knows everyone at ITR rocks with him, but I'll be sure to let him know that too, especially on Catch and Counter, that we're his #1 fans for sure.
Bro, I gotta get one of those T-shirts. You know what I'm saying? With the gold beard and all that shit. Maybe I'll do that one day. I'll dye my shit.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
For a big fight of his. If he does fight Navarrete, maybe we do that. So you come in that Friday with the gold beard. That would be fire right there. Now that he would appreciate for sure. So that would be dope. I'll let him know for sure.
And I tell you what, I'll do it. And if he wins, gold from here on out.
All right, there we go. Now he's got something to really fight for. He had something to fight for anyways, but if your beer could stay that way, that's definitely something to fight for sure. So great fight. I hope we get that. Props to Navarrete, an unbelievable performance. I kind of counted him out and didn't give him a shot, but he was able to get it done. But we'll switch over now to as a fight. Actually, before that, it was Anthony Joshua fought Robert Helenius. Helenius obviously had fought Deontay Wilder, was knocked out in the first round last year. Had a comeback fight where he fought, it looked like in a castle or something like that, some interesting place in the middle of Finland, which we're sending back and forth in our chat, kind of laughing about it. And then 2 days later, he gets the call to fight Anthony Joshua. Dillian White pops dirty for not the first, not the second, but the third time. So I don't think anything else needs to be said. You guys already know our opinions. If you pop once, okay. I'm not still a huge fan. We'll get to PED stuff more later on for sure with another fighter who just has some things circulating. Second time, all right, you can't really fool me now. Third time, all right, bro, something ain't right. You're not just getting something didn't get mixed up. You've been cheating probably for a long time. So I was happy they were able to save the show. The fight kind of went how I expected it to go. I thought AJ would he's been a slow starter recently with Derek James, been more methodical behind the jab, but I thought he was even a bit more patient than he had to be in this fight. I thought Helenius was kind of almost there to be knocked out, and he ended up getting in the 7th round, but I thought it kind of took a few more rounds than it maybe should have. But what do you think overall of Joshua's performance against Helenius, who's still he was knocked out in the first round by Deontay Wilder, so that's what everyone's going to compare, but Helenius is still a solid heavyweight, so I think overall it's still a decent win for Joshua at this point.
First off, Dillian White just fucked up his whole career, bro. To me, he's on the Jermell big baby, Miller path.
Fucked up a big bag in this one too. Big bag, 9-figure bag. Or,
and
7-figure bag. I mean,
same opponent too, right? And when he's supposed to fight Joshua Miller, Big Baby Miller was supposed to fight Joshua.
Yeah,
and fucked up the Ruiz. Now Dillian White is doing the same shit. Look, bro. I'll say this once and I'll move on. When it comes to PEDs and combat sports, period, whether it's boxing, MMA, if you're jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, no matter what, I don't fuck with you because you can legitimately kill somebody, bro. We're not talking about football, basketball, baseball, where you're just trying to knock a home run over a fence. You can literally kill somebody on PEDs and combat sports. So the fact that he's popped dirty 3 times, I hope he never gets another significant fight, period, as far as I'm concerned. With that being said, I would have liked to have seen AJ knock Helenius out in 2 rounds, 3 rounds tops, bro. They say, treat a bum like a bum. Yeah, Helenius isn't a bum necessarily, but he's taking a fight on a week notice, right? Deontay Wilder put him out cold in one round with a punch he was backing up when he threw it. I get that AJ, wasn't ever any serious trouble. Should it 7 rounds though? Come on, bro. Come on, bro. Like you said, he was being served up, and it took you a while to eat that meal. I'm just saying, get it over with.
Yeah, and no, I don't think Joshua, he was never in any danger of being knocked out, but he was touched up a little bit in this fight. I think more than they had hoped for, too. He had a little bit of a bloody nose, too. So I think those are the things that they didn't really expect going into it. But looking forward now, we just talked about these two guys, but the big fight they've talked about for maybe January in Saudi Arabia is Joshua and Deontay Wilder. So would you say at this point that Joshua is ready for Deontay Wilder? And I guess if he's not ready now, will he ever be ready? Do you roll the dice? Because I'm not sure if he's ready for it, but I think at this point, if you're getting a 60 million guarantee or whatever it is, I think you roll the dice. But what's your thoughts on maybe that fight happening late this year, early next year?
I rarely agree with Tyson Fury, but I agree with him on this. The best two boxers in the heavyweight division are him and Deontay Wilder. Mm-hmm. I think it's him, Deontay Wilder, Usyk, and then it's a steep cliff after that. Even with all the talent that's now, bustling, right? I think there's a whole bunch of talent that's here, and Tyson and Wilder are here. Or you know what I mean? Wilder is going to put AJ to sleep, and I wouldn't doubt if AJ gets some early rounds. He's a. I will say this: he's a better technical boxer than Wilder is, but that's not saying much. But Wilder's never been a technical boxer. Right.
Yeah, think about how many guys were more technical than him and then took a nap. So at the end of the day, we know how that goes.
Right. Some of them still waking up. You know what I'm saying? I mean, where's Bermain? Is he still sleeping? What Look, I mean, and Jesus, Brazil. I don't know if he's ever going to be right. That boy might need somebody to give him some hooked on phonics after that knockout. Jesus, but Luis Ortiz, who up to that point had a solid chin, like, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that AJ, if you got knocked out against Andy Ruiz, bro, Wilder needs one, bro. He doesn't need 5. He doesn't need to touch you up. He doesn't even need a good jab. He just needs to catch you slipping one time. And like I said, he doesn't even have to throw a Sunday punch to knock you out. He can be backing up. He can be throwing it from a weird angle. He damn near knocked Fury out, 2-3 times. He's the only dude really to give Fury a good fight in I don't know how many years. You know what I'm saying? Probably since the Klitschko fight, for being honest. I don't see it going any other way than maybe 5 rounds if they're lucky.
Yeah, I just don't I don't remember the last time I was this confident. I think the odds would be, even I've seen early odds, Wilder would be the slight favorite, but it'd be close to 50-50. But I don't remember the last time I was this confident in an outcome of like a 50-50 fight. I think the first Haney-Kambosos fight, which in hindsight never probably should have been a 50-50 fight, but at the time the odds were closer because, Kambosos beat Teofimo. It's in Australia. Is Haney going to get robbed? But for this one, like I said, I think that Deontay has the perfect style. And even the thought, I think, would be for Joshua, he's got to win the early rounds. But is he going to really let his hands go? If he was kind of tentative against Helenius and Jermaine Franklin in the early rounds, is he going to really let his hands go against someone like Deontay Wilder in those early rounds? So as much as I think his success would be throwing the jab and kind of letting his hands go and getting into combinations, well, those are going to set you up for the big shots from Wilder too. So game plan wise, he is the better boxer. But like we said, Luis Ortiz was a better boxer too. And so many other guys were better boxers, and we saw how that turned out. So I do hope we get the fight. I think it's a huge fight. I think that even though neither one is a champion anymore, I think it's still a huge fight. I'd even go as far to say I think that if you were to have Fury and Usyk and then Wilder and Joshua fight on the same night, I think you'd see more people wanting to watch Wilder and Joshua, and it would make more money than a Fury and Usyk fight would. Even the fight Fury and Usyk didn't happen in Saudi Arabia because they weren't sure about giving them the huge purses. Well, I'm sure that they're not going to hesitate on giving Deontay and Joshua those huge purses too. So, is it the best fight in the division? I think the undisputed fight would be the best fight in the division, but I still think it could be the biggest fight left in the division. I do think that. I hope we see it. And I'm not sure how realistic it is. It seems like it should be realistic. Eddie Hearn was saying, oh, for January, but then someone was saying, oh, he wants to get another fight in by the end of the year. So who knows? The timeline should match up at this point. Wilder, I think, would want the fight to be next. Joshua should want the fight to be next. So if it doesn't happen next, I'm not sure if it ever will happen, but I think there's still time for those guys to capitalize and make this fight happen now before Joshua loses to another one of these guys who he should beat, because then I think you can't make the fight after that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's showtime. Like it's Broadway, big lights, and bring out the stars, bro. When Wilder fights, people are going to show up. When AJ fights, countries show up. So it's going to be huge. It's probably going to do some astronomical numbers, on pay-per-view, because people want to see knockouts. And there's one thing Anthony Joshua can do, is he can knock people out, right? He's not the best technical boxer. He's got more technical boxing than Wilder, per se. But again, like we said, you can have all the technique in the world, and Wilder will put you in a damn near coma. So, he's got that eraser of a right hand. And the scary part is he's actually getting a little bit better as a boxer. Mm-hmm. That's the scary part, right? Because if he's setting shit up even better, then you're in some fucking trouble. But it's not only the power, but the speed in which he throws that right hand.
The timing, the accuracy, all those things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't see it coming, bro. Like Brazil never saw that punch coming. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Luis Ortiz never saw those. Luis Ortiz actually had a good defense set up in that last fight, and still got knocked out because he left that little bitty window open. Mm-hmm. Lights out, right? We've talked about the Tyson Fury situation. Anthony Joshua does not have a Tyson Fury chin. He doesn't have a Luis Ortiz chin. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If Wilder lands a right hand, it is good night, Irene. Mm-hmm. As my see, look, even Wilder got my light even scared. You understand? Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, I think the light was showing what would happen to Joshua if Wilder lands. It'll fall right over. So.
Timber. Look, bro, it's a wrap if Wilder lands that right hand. The caveat is okay, you do have to be worried about what Anthony Joshua is throwing back at Wilder, but I don't really think Wilder's too concerned with that. I think he's going to be able to do enough to get around what Anthony Joshua does, and it could be, unless Anthony lands something early, like super early, it's good night Irene for him.
Like Bean said right here, lights out. But I think that the work he's done with Malik Scott, I think that Wilder is a better boxer now than he's ever been before. The third Fury fight, even though he lost the fight, he did a lot of good things early in that fight. He won the first round off. He was using the jab well for his timing. He was throwing the right hand. He was working the body, something he's never really done as much before. So I think that he's never going to be kind of a five-tool guy. He's never going to be able to do every single thing that you have. He's never going to be an Usyk or Tyson Fury. But I think he's more developed now, and he has more tools in his toolbox now than ever before, which makes him dangerous. And the thing for this fight is, I think that a lot of people say that whoever lands first is going to win the fight. But I'm not sure if Joshua puts Wilder down. We've seen Wilder get back up and knock Fury down twice. So I don't think the fight's over at that point. But if Wilder puts Joshua down, we haven't seen Joshua after he's been put down. In the Klitschko fight, actually, so I do take that back. He was knocked down in the Klitschko fight, and he did recover. But I also, that was bad. He was completely buck up. But I also think that Wilder hits harder than a 41-year-old Klitschko did. So I guess I do take that back a little bit because I did forget about that. But I still do think that if Wilder gets put down, I think he can still come back and win. I think if Joshua gets put down, I think it would be a lot harder for him to come back and win. So I do think that it'll be a tough one for him. But then again, it's heavyweight boxing. Anything can happen. We've been surprised by outcomes. We were both surprised by an outcome just last week in boxing. We both picked Valdez. So anything can happen. I just do hope we do get that fight before it's too late. And shout out to Backyard Prophet also saying salute fight family. Salute to you for tuning in. We appreciate you and everybody in the chat and everyone watching for sure.
What's up, man? Appreciate you for tuning in to Catch and Counter. Look, I'll be honest with you, man. There's really not a universe that I see Anthony Joshua winning this fight, bro. Does he have an opportunity? Does he have a chance? Yes. It's heavyweight boxing, like you just said. So, and he's heavy-handed. Again, if there's one thing you can say about him, is Anthony Joshua can't. If he lands on you, that shit hurts. As most of his opponents have found out. Hell, even the first time around with Andy, right? He put Andy on his ass. But you saw what happened when they ran it back. He did not want any smoke with Andy. You know what I mean? He was touching him up and running. I think that's going to be the game plan against Wilder, right? Touch him up and get out of there. Or try to. The problem is eventually you got to get in there and mix it up, right? You can't just run for 12 rounds. And expect to win in a heavyweight fight. You have to land something of significance. Plus, Wilder's going to be coming for your ass. You know what I mean? Because what has he seen recently that's going to scare him? Nothing. If Usyk can get around you for 12 rounds, if Andy Ruiz can put you on your ass, and hurt you bad, only imagine what he's going to do once he gets his paws on you. But again, there's always that what if. It's why we watch heavyweight fights, bro. I thought, as most people thought, Jared Anderson was going to walk through, his opponent,
Charles Martin.
You know what I mean?
And it's funny looking back because that's the same Charles Martin who Joshua knocked out in 2 rounds. So it just shows that anything can happen in these fights, because I don't think looking back on it, people wouldn't have given. People look back and said, oh, well, Charles Martin, this and that. Well, Charles Martin had a great fight with Jared Anderson, and Joshua wiped him out. So it just goes to your point that anything can happen in these fights. So you never truly know, even when we think we're 99% sure.
Yeah, and I think that, it's kind of unfair to kind of weigh what they did to Helenius against one another. I think because of Wilder's just natural power, right? His ability to put Helenius out in the first round. Let's face it, there aren't a lot of people in the history of heavyweight boxing that can knock people out backing up. Maybe Muhammad Ali, was the last true great heavyweight to be able to do some shit like that. Mike Tyson had the kind of power to do it, but he was never backing up anyway. So Tyson Fury can do it, but he doesn't have to back up now. So you look at, that's just not what AJ was going to do. So, it's kind of unfair to judge him based off of that. Would we have liked him to get him out of there quicker? Yeah, but, again, I think they both did what they had to do.
Yeah, and Josh, so Bean saying that NPC he fought had his face marked up. I can only imagine what Wilder or Fury does to him. But Joshua brought up a good point when comparing. He said styles make fights, and he brought up a good point. Also, he said when they both fought Eric Molina, Wilder got him out of there in 9. Joshua got him out of there in 3. So it all depends. Each time you get in there, guys are different on each night. So I think that he said you never know exactly what to expect. And going back to the comment you made before about just Joshua and the boxing and being on the back foot, he was able to do it against a guy like Andy Ruiz, but I just think that against a guy like Wilder too. So not only is it just that Wilder hits harder, but it's also the dimensions he has. It's easier to get out of the way of Andy Ruiz, who was 6'1", 6'2", was heavy there. He was over 280, and he's got a shorter arm reach, 70-something arm reach. You're in against Deontay Wilder, who's 6'7", 85-inch arm reach, and he's got dynamite in those hands. And Joshua's not a defensive wizard. He's not Pernell Whitaker. He kind of blocks shots decently well sometimes, but he always keeps his head on the center line. So I think that Wilder, even if Joshua does try to box, I think that might even hurt him more because he's not going to get out of the way, and he's always going to be lined up for that one-hitter quitter at the end of the day too. So I think his best chance, which I think we'd both agree on this, is probably just to kind of try to back Wilder up and land some combinations and do work that way. And I don't think either one ends well for him. But I think if you try to box him and stay away, I think that it's just a ticking time bomb at that point for him.
I think that the hard part, not just for Joshua, but anybody, not named Tyson Fury, when fighting, or shit, even Tyson Fury, because he still lands his punches. When you're fighting Deontay Wilder, is that he doesn't always have to throw his punches from the traditional stance, right? He can launch his punch from anywhere. Anthony Joshua is way more mechanical with his punches than Wilder is. He's way more traditional in the way he's throwing his ones and twos. Wilder can throw his shit from Sunday, and hit you next week Tuesday. So that's what I'm saying is that you have, and there's really no way to prepare for that. You can, but once you're in that ring, bro, it's different. It's like the Navarrete fight, right? You see him throwing that uppercut. When he throws that uppercut, you're thinking there's no way he lands that shit the way he throws it.
And you're thinking, oh, I can counter that easily.
Right, because he's telegraphing the shit out of it, and he's damn near dragging his kneecaps, when he's bringing it up, but he lands that motherfucker every time. So it's like that. Like we've all seen Wilder throw a punch. We're like, what the fuck? And then he lands the motherfucker and's got you, doing the stanky leg afterwards. That's one of the hardest things to train for because you're not really ready or prepared from where that's coming from. And most of the time you don't see it because of that. And I think that, and just, I just think Wilder's better than Joshua. I think it goes bad.
It's a good comment by Backyard Prophet. He said Usyk and even Ruiz are much more skilled than Wilder. AJ might box circles around him. I mean, I'm someone who's I think we're both AJ fans. I'm a big AJ fan too. I thought that the second Usyk fight was probably the best Joshua I've maybe even ever seen. I thought that, even I've said on here before, that I think that AJ is even a bit underrated now, if anything. A lot of people like to say he's overrated. He's a hype job. I think he's even underrated now because a lot of people view Usyk as this guy who could beat Tyson Fury, this pound for pound elite, this and that. And that second fight was close between him and AJ. AJ won a decent amount of rounds in that fight, but I just think at the end of the day, Joshua is even those guys, and Joshua is more skilled than Wilder, but I don't think the skill gap is enough for him to be able to do it for 12 full rounds. And I just think that even if he has a boxing ability, I think he is too. He's very technical, but I think he's too stiff and too robotic and doesn't get out of the way of shots good enough. Even against a guy like Helenius, he was eating more shots than he should have. He was never in any danger in that fight, but I think against a guy like Wilder, even if you're trying to avoid those shots, I just don't think he has the fluidity in his body, I guess, to be able to kind of do that. But you never know if Wilder is just a step, if his legs kind of come in a bit heavy, or if anything, if like that, anything can happen. So I do think that AJ has the ability to do it, but at the end of the day, I just think that his physical stature and just his kind of the stiffness in his body, I think will work against him at the end of the
day. It's his only chance. Let me put it this way. It's his only chance is to box. If he wants to get on his bike, if he wants to box, if he wants to, give angles, do all that shit, he's got a chance. Right. And that's the only one he has. But, we say this over and over and over again. Wilder's been losing fights, where he's down probably 9-1 on the cards. And in the 10th or 11th round, he puts somebody to sleep because he doesn't need to be great for 12 rounds. He needs to be great for 12 seconds.
Yeah, 1 second even.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where I agree with Prophet. He can box Wilder, right? And that's the only chance he has to win. But then you have to hope and pray that there's not a 1 to 12 second lapse in your defense, because if there is, they'll be telling you about the fight tomorrow. Whenever that fight happens, and serving you applesauce. Because, look, it is what it is. Wilder, again, the reason people love him so much, and the reason he is who he is because literally he is the hardest hitting heavyweight, period. And when he hits you, you stop. And there's no getting up and trying again, unless your name is Tyson Fury. So, and I I just don't see that. Even if AJ boxes the shit out of him for 11 rounds, does he have that in him for 12?
Yeah. And going back to even what I said, just that AJ is the better boxer out of those two, but he's never been someone, he's not a guy like Usyk who attacks from angles. He doesn't move he's not kind of cutting on dimes and really setting things up as much as those kind of guys. So I do think he's the better boxer than Wilder, but I've said it before, but I think he's a bit too stationary, too straight up, and I think all those things will come back to bite him in the ass at some point. Could be round 1, could be round 6, could be round 11, but I think at some point between rounds 1 through 12, I think Deontay would catch him.
I will say this though, I am believe it or not, I'm actually an AJ fan. And the reason I'm an AJ fan is because, after these fights, he's not giving excuses, right? Like, after the Usyk fights, he's like, yo, I lost, but I'll be back. And he's got this attitude where, hey, I took a couple L's, but shit, I'm going to come right back. And the fact that he wants the smoke with Wilder, right? Let's face it, there's nobody else calling for Wilder. Andy was trying, but he wants the payday. Let's be real clear.
Mm-hmm.
He done ran through all his AJ money, and now he wants another payday. Nobody really wants smoke with Deontay Wilder, bro, because they see what he does to everybody that that does. So we'll see. And I respect him for it, and I do think he is smart enough to understand that he can't slug it out with Deontay Wilder. Nobody can. You know what I mean? You're not going to win a slugfest with Deontay Wilder. It's just not going to happen. But you've got to be able to box and maybe catch him with something, a couple of things actually, because you got to put him down a couple of times before you get him out of there.
Yeah, and it goes without being said too. For me, just I think anybody who knows me and listen to us knows that I'm a big AJ fan too. I think besides Wilder, I would root for AJ to beat. I mean, he wouldn't beat Tyson Fury. I would be Team AJ all the way in that fight. I wanted him to beat Usyk. In those fights, I gave him credit for after the first fight, stepping back and fighting Usyk. Even going back to that fight, I gave him a ton of credit because he didn't have to fight Usyk in that fight. He could have waited for the Fury fight and made a whole bunch of money for Undisputed, but he said, you know what? I'll take the Usyk fight. It didn't turn out good for him, but he's never been the kind of guy to shy away from a challenge either. So I do think at the end of the day, he will take this fight in. I'm a huge fan of his at the end of the day. There were 3 guys who I'm newer to the sport, as you know, and some of these viewers might not know, but I've only been watching boxing a few years, and there were 3 guys who kind of got me into the sport as a casual fan that kind of attracted me and made me start becoming a hardcore fan, and it was Deontay Wilder, Tank Davis, and Anthony Joshua. So that was when those 2 guys were the heavyweight champ. Tank was kind of coming up. So those 3 guys will always have a special place in my heart just because they kind of got me into the sport. So win, lose, or draw. Even AJ, I'll even be a bigger fan of AJ. I'm already a huge AJ fan. If he takes this Wilder fight, win, lose, or draw, I'll be an even bigger fan of his without a doubt. So, like I said, I think that goes without being said, but I did want to make that known for sure. I'm not someone who hates on AJ or anything like that. I think he's even an underrated fighter right now, undervalued. I think he's a hell of a fighter, and he's always down for a challenge.
And, again, it's one of those things, right? Losses don't make you a bum, bro. He's got 2 losses to arguably one of the better boxers, period. You know what I mean? In the heavyweight division. Again, not named Tyson Fury. So, he's got a loss to, Andy Ruiz, but let's face it, Andy Ruiz isn't a chump either. I say this all the time. I thought he won his fight with Joseph Parker. Could have gone any way though, so I'm not calling a robbery. But Andy Ruiz is Andy Ruiz. Like he's not a chump either. He probably beats most guys in the division right now, for being honest. So yeah, I mean, if he loses to Wilder and it's competitive, right? Like let's say they have this fight and it goes 10, 12, 11 rounds. Let's say he actually survives, and it goes to a decision. Shit, he gets way more love and respect as far as I'm concerned if that happens. If he gets knocked, even if he gets knocked out in the first round, bro, the fact that he took the fight is respectable. You know what I'm saying? And then you can say, okay, well, Wilder does that to everybody. You know what I mean? And then he can go on. I still think he'll have a decent career no matter what happens after the fight. Obviously, if he wins, it'll be huge for him. But and kudos and hats off to Wilder because he doesn't have to take that fight either.
Mm-hmm.
Wilder's got options. He's only had one fight back. Since the Fury beat down. And that was against Robert Helenius, who let's face it, he's not a bum, but he's an opponent at this point. So if I was Wilder, I mean, you could say no one would give him shit for taking another tune-up, but you jumping into the deep waters with facing AJ. So kudos and hats off to both of them if they make the fight, and if it actually happens, I'll be watching.
Yeah, another comment here saying you're both right, of course, but I don't discount AJ catching Wilder with the counter and putting him down. AJ doesn't have Wilder's power, but he can crack without a doubt. And he said, we're saying, oh, Wilder has the power advantage, but AJ is steamrolled. We just saw what he did to Helenius, so it's not like he can't punch. So that is, I think that Wilder is going to have to be careful, because if Wilder just lets AJ hit him right on the chin, you're damn right he will hurt him, and he probably will put him down. So that is something that's why I think the fight is so enticing, because people know they're not going to go in there, and those two guys aren't going to try to move around and jab each other to death for 12 rounds. Those two guys are going in there. They're two hard-hitting guys who are looking to knock the other guy out. And at the end of the day, I think that's why people watch boxing, and especially heavyweight boxing.
You know what? I would love if this turned into, Wilder Ortiz 2-1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that first fight between him and Ortiz was
classic.
I mean, bro, and he got caught with some shit. I was like, oh wait, I thought they was gonna stop the fight.
He was out on his feet in that 7th round. That's one of the fights that I watched back and made me get into boxing. I didn't see that fight live, but looking back, I was like, I had known about those guys. I didn't watch. I forget what I was doing that night. Didn't watch it, but looking back, I was like, I got to start catching these fights live, because I saw that fight now. I was like, wow, that shit was crazy.
If you get that out of Wilder and AJ, hey, bro, you get my money. You get me as a fan, bro. And that's what we're hoping happens, right? We're hoping that we don't get a Wilder Helenius, a Wilder Brazil. We're hoping we don't get that. We're hoping we get, the Wilder Fury 3. We're hoping we get that kind of fight out of these guys. And, shit, hey, if it happens, no matter what happens, it's a great fight for boxing. Let's put it that way. And it'll be a great night for boxing. I'd actually be interested to see who they put on the undercard for that fight.
Especially if it's in Saudi Arabia, they got the money over there. So I know they'd pay the main event. Hopefully they get a solid undercard.
Hey, Tank doesn't have a dancing partner right now. Could you imagine that? Putting Tank on.
I think now boxing's been really good for us. I think we're starting to kind of get now. That would be boxing treating us really, really well. I would love to see it. I mean, I'm never gonna say never. You never know. I'm gonna pray for that before I go to bed tonight for sure. Now, but
I think though, right, Jack, and I think maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, but I think that now more so than before, big name fighters are cool with having each other on each other's. Like, I think these guys, because a lot of them are now getting more into the business side of things, whereas the promoters kind of just ran the sport, the last however long, right? Now these fighters have a lot more control over who they're fighting and what's going on. And you see a lot of these guys are cool with, each other. I wouldn't put it past some of these fighters talking to each other and be like, hey, let's put on a mega card. Give the fans what they want. And it would only help all of them, right? Because even win, lose, or draw, if you're on one of those mega cards, you're going to get fans. People are going to show up and pay money to watch you fight, no matter what happens in your fight, because you're giving us something we want.
Yeah, I mean, shit. They were even talking. The original talk was Saudis would make those two heavyweight fights on the same card. They were gonna do Fury and Usyk and Wilder and Joshua all on the same night. So, which seems crazy, but I mean, if they're giving out, like you said, some guys don't want to take the ego of being a co-main event, but if they're handing out those $50 million guarantees, a lot of egos go away real quick. And I think at the end of the day, people will be okay with being
look at the fights we've got this year so far, bro. You know what I mean? A handful of years ago, we wouldn't have had half of these fights so far, bro.
Most of them,
you know what I mean? I mean, I know we're getting a little greedy, like you
Mm.
said. You know, we putting
Yeah.
our hands in the cookie jar right now.
But we can
But
also
shit,
afford to do that now because of the fights we've gotten. We have the right now to say maybe these fights aren't too crazy because who would have thought that we'd be even Canelo and Jermell Charlo, which we'll talk about right after this. That would have seemed crazy once upon a time, but here we are and it's actually happening. So we have a right to kind of dream a little bit now because dreams can turn into realities.
bro, it's a, and I say this again, like I said, because I think had Bud still been with Top Rank, that fight wouldn't have happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bud's not with Top Rank, literally, and both of those guys have said it. So I'm not speaking out of turn when I say this. Is that it took them talking to each other on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
having conversations, not even about boxing, and then spinning the block on each other a couple of weeks later and saying, "Hey, let's hash out these numbers,"
Mm-hmm.
and it got done quick. Like
Mm-hmm.
when they were in charge, boom, right? You saw Tank and Ryan. Tank and Ryan been talking about fighting each other for years. They got together, had a conversation. What happens? Fight gets made, bro. Could you imagine if you'd have had like Tank versus Ryan on the same card as Errol and
Mm-hmm.
Bud, kind of
Oh
shit,
my lord. Mm-hmm.
bro? You know how many people would have showed up for that shit?
Mm-hmm.
And if you kind of want a cheat code, right, and you want to blow out these Mayweather numbers, right, put on one of these mega cards.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get those $1-2 million buys that people keep talking can happen,
That's how you do it.
yo. Because bro, I'm gonna tell you right now, I usually don't pay for the fights. I stream them. I'm not gonna lie. Don't. Somebody come
Mm-hmm.
looking for me. But I'm gonna tell you right now, if Deontay Wilder and Joshua fight each other, and there's another big name fighter on that card, I'm paying for that one. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Because you have to respect the sport enough to give it. If they're gonna give us that, I'm going to pay for it, bro. I paid for Bud and Spence, bro, because I was
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? I respect the fact that these dudes are giving us what the fuck we want, and that undercard was crazy too. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Nah, for sure.
Well,
And
I thought it was. It was kind of
yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the idea was there though on it. But yeah, boxing's a dirty game. So I think anytime if Wilder and Joshua do make this fight, they would both make a shit ton of money. Rumors before was something like Joshua 60 million guarantee, Wilder 35, $40 million guarantee. So if those guys are able to get any money near that, at the end of the day, we all want to see. I'm never here to say a fighter or anything. Those boxers can never be overpaid, and you're worth whatever the market dictates for you. So if that's what the market dictates for you, I hope it's how it is something like that. And just for those guys, I'd love to see the fight be made, and also those guys earn the type of money like that for sure, because they're risking their lives at the end of the day.
For our entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like it's football players do it to a certain extent. Baseball player because you get hit by one of them pitches, that's your ass.
Mm-hmm.
But MMA and boxing, bro, they're literally putting their lives on the line for our entertainment. That's wild. I
Mm-hmm.
look. I ain't letting nobody punch me in the face for some
Mm-hmm.
money. Fuck out of here. And this is their guy. These guys do it all the time. So, but I tell you, if somebody gets in each other's ears and they create one of these super fights, you can name your price, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's the formula, right? A lot of people give Don King has kind of become a butt of a lot of jokes in boxing now. But when you look at those fight cards he had, coming up, you know, the Mike Tyson era, right? You load up those fight cards. One, because Tyson's fights were over quick as shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you know, there were sometimes 2-3 title fights before you even got to Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then you get then you get the spectacle, the
Yeah.
Tyson fight.
You'd have Chavez, some of those guys on his undercard as champions, which is crazy to think about now.
Right. But when you think of it that way, back then, they were generating astronomical numbers. Nobody was coming close to
Mm-hmm.
touching Mike Tyson numbers back
Mm-hmm.
then. Mayweather, he got into the business later on in his career where, he's loading up his undercards, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do that because people will pay to see those good ass fights. They'll pay more money because every time they go, well shit, no matter what I get in the main event, I'm getting fights I should show up early for. You would rarely see on a Floyd card empty seats once they got to the main card, right? You know what I'm saying? Because people were showing up for those fights because they mean something. Tyson was the same way. Like people were showing up, but well before his fight to watch those fights because they meant something.
Yeah, for sure. So we've had a lot of big fights this year. It seems like we're going to have some more. We're never against a big fight here or there. This would be a big fight in stature. Both these guys are big guys, but it would be a huge commercial fight also. So I think that we can all just hope and pray that we do get this fight and both guys are paid, which once it gets to the Saudis, I know that's kind of a controversial topic. We don't even want to get into where the money's getting from, but unlike, I know you talk about Don King being jokes, but unlike the Don King, at least you're guaranteed to your check will clear. I'm sure once you get your money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We're not sure where the money comes from, or we know, but we might not want to speak on it. But at the end of the day, you will get that money. So I think that it would be great to have that fight and have some other big undercards on that too.
The golfers ain't the only one that can go over there and get that bag.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, people can argue about where the money comes from, but these people are getting paid, and they getting paid up front, bro. Mm-hmm. So hey, I'm not mad at anybody for feeding their family. Do what you got to do. You can nitpick how they do it, but hey, I'm not mad at you at all, bro. Go get your money, and you know we can talk about the rest of that shit another time. That's a whole nother platform. But I'd be amazed if it does happen, overjoyed when it does. But let's talk about the fight that has been made, bro. Mm-hmm. Undisputed, Jack.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know you was just getting into that, but I've been
not perfect. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm excited, baby. Undisputed versus undisputed. When do you get that shit?
Well, never in the 4-belt era. Never since. Like you'd have to go back to, I don't even know off the top of my head. Sometime 50s, 60s, 70s, and that's when it wasn't in the 3 or 4-belt era. It never happened before. And Jermell's not jumping up one weight class; he's jumping up 2 weight classes for it.
And you have to respect that, bro. Like, yeah, a lot of people when you see them next to each other, Jermell is a bigger guy physically. You know what I'm saying? But I want people to understand Canelo's been fighting in or around the middleweight division since 2010. You feel me? That's almost 15 years that he's been a legitimate middleweight. And he probably hasn't made 154 and God knows when, you know, but he's been fighting at 168, you know, at least since 2015. So he's been taking punches from the bigger guys. That's another thing that people don't account. Yeah, Jermell might actually end up being bigger than him come fight night because, you know, he's a bigger guy, so he does carry more weight. But he hasn't been taking 168, 175-pound punches. He's been taking 154-pound punches his whole career. That's a difference. So, but I'm here for it. I can't wait. I do think Canelo's going to win, but I will say this. I think that Charlo can give him problems, at least early.
Yeah, I think he can give him hell for sure. And I'm still not, a lot of people have been saying that Jermell's the bigger guy. I'm still not even totally convinced of that. I think he looks bigger. I think in street clothes, he's taller. The Charlos, they do have broad shoulders, so they do it looks like they carry the weight. He is a pretty jacked up guy, but I also know that Canelo, he's shorter, but Canelo has like, and he's barrel tested. Yeah, and he's thick. He's got he's got the big strong legs too. He's got the big calves. So I think that the weight, I think Jermell's big up top, but just like any of those guys, Spence, his brother, those guys who are bigger up top, you can't possibly be as big down low either. I know that they have the skinnier legs down there. So I do think that Canelo will probably be a bit heavier on fight night, or even it's close in comparison. But I think as long as exactly what you said too, I think this is the biggest X factor to me in the fight is how does Jermell take the punches of Canelo? Because they'll be close, relatively the same size, but like you said, he's never been hit by. He's been wobbled a bit by Castano and Tony Harris and these other guys. Never really hurt, never in danger of going down or anything like that. But Canelo is a much more compact puncher. He's a bigger, stronger guy than those guys are, and he's been hit by big guys before. So Jermell's not going to have. Jermell's still a very strong puncher too. I think at 168, he's going to carry that power pretty well, but Canelo's been hit by bigger guys before where Jermell hasn't. So to me, I think that is the biggest X factor in the fight. And I think that if Jermell can take Canelo's punches well enough, I think he probably wins, honestly. It's a big if because you got to see how he takes the punch, especially once Canelo starts digging down to that body. How does that kind of slow Jermell down or anything like that? But I think that the jab of Jermell, just his combinations, the way he's been utilizing his footwork, fighting off the ropes. Joan Guzman has done a great job with him. Derek James is his head trainer, but Joan Guzman does not get nearly enough credit for being his secondary trainer. He did a lot of work with him. The second Castano fight, you saw a lot of Joan Guzman. He fought kind of like Guzman in that second fight, the way he was able to counter, pivot, fight off the ropes, show more dimension in his game. So he's got the style that can kind of give Canelo some problems. I do think that Jermell kind of, just even like we talked about Joshua earlier, in a different way, but he does kind of get touched up a bit more than I'd like. I think you saw Castano and Harrison put hands on him in the first fight. Even in the rematches, they were putting hands on him, but I think Jermell's power ended up being a difference in those fights. So this is a hell of a fight. I think it's close to a 50-50 fight, in my opinion, honestly. I think I would have to still give the slight edge to Canelo, just based on he's been the bigger guy. He's been there, done that against bigger guys. He's a more accomplished guy. But Jermell Charlo is the definition of a live dog in this fight. I see Canelo's like a 3-1, 4-1 favorite in this fight. So even if I'm picking Canelo, I'm looking at Jermell at like that plus 250 odds, plus 300 odds, and I'm saying that might be worth a little something right there too, especially if he's able to take the power.
I'm telling you right now, if the odds against Charlo are anything near or around +3, put your money on him. Mm-hmm. Whether he wins, I'm trying to tell you that's ridiculous. This is a much more even fight than people think. Even though I think Canelo can win the fight, I don't think it's going to be easy for either one of them. I think this is going to be a good fight. One thing, and you pretty much said this, but I'm going to just wrap it up, is people don't give Charlo enough credit for his ring IQ, right? All those things you were talking about, right? His movement, his footwork, to plug our show a little bit, his catch and counter ability, 100%. Right? The way he orchestrates. I mean, that rematch with Castano was a thing of beauty.
Unbelievable performance, pound for pound performance. Mm-hmm.
When you consider who Castano was that first fight, and to give him what he gave him that second fight, it was night and day, bro. It was night and day. So that's what I give. If I give any edge, I give that to Charlo. And I think at this point in his career, it's perfect timing for Charlo to fight Canelo, right? Mm-hmm. Canelo was kind of, I wouldn't say he's going down, but he's kind of, this way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you're going to beat him, now is the time to beat him. He's been doing this for over 20 years. People forget he started boxing when he was a teenager in Mexico because he couldn't fight over here. He turned pro really young, and he's been fighting a long time. And Bivol kind of gave you the roadmap, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to be able to knock him out. You just got to be able to box the shit out of him. And I think Charlo has that ability. So for me, if Charlo does that, if Charlo's ring IQ shows up, like you said, he can win this fight. Again, the thing for me, and I say this a lot, is I think Canelo doesn't get a lot of credit for his ring IQ because it increased expeditiously after the Mayweather fight. Mm-hmm. You saw huge improvements in his game.
That his defense, all those things. Mm-hmm.
Oh, bro, it's beautiful to watch, right? Because when you look at what he was, the typical Mexican fighter, and then he fought Floyd, and he said, "Well, hold on, wait a minute." That's the cheat code. I want to do that. Mm-hmm. And he combines that typical Mexican style with what he learned from the Mayweather fight, and it's a thing of beauty, right? He's on the decline a little bit, so if there's a chance to, like I said, if there's a chance to catch him, now is then. But the thing for me is Canelo's a high level fighter, and again, what I said before, he's been taking 168 to 175 pound punches, for years, and Charlo's just not taking that. Those weight classes matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they have them for a reason. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I mean, unless, and again, we're not talking about the Charlo that's 160 moving up to 168. We're talking about the Charlo that's 154 and it's been 154. So it's different, and I think to me that's what the difference is going to be.
Yeah, and looking back, I was checking the odds too. So DraftKings has Canelo at a -425 and Jermell at a +300, meaning Jermell by decision, because I don't think he would knock Canelo out. Jermell by decision, which is, if you're gonna bet Jermell, you might as well probably bet Jermell by decision, but a +500 right now. So
What?
yeah.
Oh,
I mean, think about it.
man.
If he's +325 to win, it's gonna be more than that for a decision. You got him at like a +490 by decision right now. So something to think about. I know I'm gonna be placing a little something on that for sure come fight night.
If you're listening to this show, if you're watching us live, if you're watching us on replay on YouTube, however you're watching us, go ahead and put 10, 20, 30, whatever little extra change you got that you wasn't going to be spending no way, right?
Yeah.
Put
like you're
that
saying,
on Jermell
a responsible amount, of course. We want to promote responsible gambling, of course. But
to go ahead and put that on Charlo to win by decision. Because I'm here to tell you, if it's money you was going to throw away anyway, you won't miss it. But I'm here to tell you, at those odds, yeah, buddy. Charlo's too good for that not to be a potential, thing to happen.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised that the odds were as wide as they were on that. So we'll kind of now touch a bit on, because we'll be able to break the fight down in many shows going forward too, and I can't wait to kind of get in more into that fight too. But they had the two pressers this week, so both guys are very respectful. Were you surprised at all about how Jermell's kind of always been a rah-rah guy? He's always kind of gone at it with guys. Were you caught off guard or surprised at all by just how respectful and kind of low-key he was the whole week? And do you think that helps him at all, or hurts him at all? Do you not read into it as much? But what were your thoughts on just Jermell and just, how we kind of dealt with everything this week?
You know what? I think you don't need it. In a fight this big, you don't need that rah-rah shit. People are going to come out because it's Canelo and it's Charlo.
Yeah.
Right? Period. Like, Charlo's pretty much got the state of Texas behind him, right? And anybody in his region. Canelo also has Texas, but he's got, Mexico. He's got so many people, pretty much anybody with Spanish blood in there. In their heritage is showing up to watch him fight. So you don't need it. A fight of this magnitude, undisputed versus undisputed, you don't need it. And I think Bud and Spence proved that, right? These guys were they're talking their shit, but for the most part, they were gentlemanly towards each other. You know what I'm saying? And people still showed out for that fight. A lot of times guys are doing all that rah-rah, I'm going to kill your mother type shit because they selling the fight. They got to get people's butts in this. You ain't got to do that shit. People are already showing up. This fight's probably going to sell out. If they don't run any more promotion for it, it's probably going to sell out and probably do some big numbers on pay-per-view. So I'm cool with it, man. Like, I don't think you have to do it every fight. I think there are certain fights you want to see, but I'm cool with this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Jermell's always kind of strikes me as the kind of guy where he'll be cool kind of doing this, and he kind of waits until the guy kind of starts first, and then he'll go back. Like him and Tony Harrison had a lot of big moments because Harrison was a talker too. So if Jermell's like, okay, if you're a talker, well, I'll show you what I'm about in that part of it too. But if you're not, I think he's kind of cool with staying off to the side, kind of doing his own thing. But to your point too, I don't read much into it because I think if anybody thinks this means Jermell's not going to have that dog in him come fight night, I think you are completely bugging. Like, this has nothing to do with he is going to come respectful or not, shaking his hand, say it, complimenting his English. I don't give a shit what he says at any of these press conferences. He is coming to take his head off September 30th. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Bro, they were both on the Breakfast Club with DJ Envy and Charlamagne the God, and they were trying to goad them both into talking shit about each other. I think they have a legitimate respect for each other, bro. Like, I think there's a legit respect there. There's not I'm not putting on as Charlo just because, Canelo is giving me this chance to make astronomical money, or we're not doing this because we're both undisputed. We're doing this because we're undisputed, but also because we have a legit respect for what the other guy's doing. I think Canelo legitimately respects the fact that Charlo's taking the fight.
Yeah.
He's taking it on a little bit of a later notice. And Charlo doesn't have to do it, right? He's stepping in for his brother. Obviously, there's a lot of respect that can go Canelo's way, no matter who you are, right? So I think it's legit, bro. I think that these guys don't have a reason to, do anything other than, get in the ring. And we hear boxers all this time. To your point, they say, yeah, I can be your best friend. We can be out drinking, but once we get into that ring, I'm trying to kill you. You know what I mean? And it's different. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that's what it is. I think, and Charlo and Canelo are both made of that cloth.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think for Charlo, he's always had the respect for Canelo. He's even said that's been the guy he's been chasing. Obviously, that's the big name guy, the guy who is like just the money guy in and around his division. So that's the fight he's always looked for. And on Canelo's side, he's like, okay, this guy's undisputed at 154, but he's now jumping up 2 weight classes to fight me. So that's a bad motherfucker also. So I think both guys had the respect for each other. And even to prove your point even more, Amanda Serrano and Heather Hardy were pretty good friends. They had a lot of respect for each other. And that didn't stop Serrano from trying to take Heather Hardy's head off from the opening bell. So I think that shows that there's many other examples of that in boxing too. But once fight night comes, everything goes out the window.
If you don't know shit about women's boxing, look up Heather Hardy, bro. She's got more balls than most dudes do. Because I'm going to tell you, she was again, I don't think Serrano gets the respect that she deserves. She was putting a beating on Heather Hardy. Most dudes would have crumbled, bro.
95% at least, I'd say. For sure.
Right. It was funny. There was a point where the referee had asked Heather Hardy, because she was all bloody and all this. He's like, do you want to continue? The look on her face was like, the fuck? Like, do you know who the fuck I am? Like, you know what I mean? Like, get the fuck out of my face. Yeah, I want to continue. And even though she had zero chance of winning that fight, she never lost the dog, bro. She was always there throwing, and you got to respect it. Hats off to her. She never had a chance of winning, but I respect that more than some of the counterparts who were juicing a little bit.
For sure. Perfect kind of segue into that. So we'll shout out to TJ too. Appreciate you. Said what up, my guys. Obviously, we've had him on. Got to have TJ on as a guest on our new platform pretty soon, I'm sure too. I can definitely rearrange that at some point. Someone who knows this boxing really, really well and fits in with us. So, as you just said, we'll transition. We'll just spend a few minutes on this before we wrap up. But Alicia Baumgartner, someone who we are both huge fans of, which this always confuses me too. But there was a report that came out this week that she had failed a test, not after, but before the fight. So my question is how the hell are we finding out about this now? Because it was before the fight against Christina Linar-Dartu, who was the woman who had given Alicia her first loss. Alicia had avenged it, but now we're seeing there's some context behind that loss. So Alicia had tested positive for a banned substance. Off the top of my head, I forget exactly what it was. I had read a bit about it. And you might know a little more than me on that, but she had tested positive, and then 2 more tests before the fight. It came back clean, but at the end of the day, once it's in your system, it's in your system, and you popped for it. We know a lot of people cycle through things, so it could have been, were they on a cycle and they fucked up the cycle by a day or 2, so they were clean by the fight, but they were dirty before that. So a lot of question marks, still not many answers a lot about this. I mean, shit, we still don't have answers for the Conor Benn thing that was last year at this point, so who knows if we will get any answers on this. But what are your thoughts on her popping? Do you have any more insight into what it was and the benefits of what she popped for? Because off the top of my head, I'm not too sure about it.
So according to the ESPN report, and the statement that was released was she tested positive for mestrolone and methamphetamine acetate. Both of those popped up in her pre-fight. But it said that both those substances were not in her post-fight. She was clear in her post-fight. These are and these are steroids, bro. Let's. She was taking steroids. She had steroids in her system. These weren't, you know, things you take for something else. These were steroids. If these two things are in your system, you're juicing. So the fact that they were present at all in your pre-fight, even if they were at trace amounts, means you were trying to get an advantage at some point. And for those that may or may not know how anabolic steroids or juicing works, a lot of times what these athletes do when they're juicing, whether it's no matter what sport you're in, everybody from Lance Stevenson to your favorite football player, basketball player, etc., when they know they're going to be tested, they run a cleanse. They run these cleaners through their system so that if when they do test, there's either such a trace amount of what they've been taking that, you know, most people will give them a pass, or that it clears for their event, right? But the advantage has been earned at this point. I think watching the Lance Armstrong documentary, they were doing blood transfusions to avoid this. You know what I mean? They were on some whole other shit. But most people can run a cleanse system, usually about 2 to 3 days before they test, and piss clear or get their blood drawn clear. It's a little bit more tricky on the blood draws, but you can usually piss clear. And probably what happened is, and we were talking about this, pre-show, is she was probably a little late on her cycle, or maybe she didn't get all the way through that clear, or maybe she was taking a little bit too much of the juice and it didn't clear all the way by the time her post or pre-fight test came in, but it had run its cycle after the fight, and that's why she tested clear after that. Again, this is speculation on my part. I'm not a doctor, but it doesn't look good. And if I'm Lindertow, I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Maybe, can I get this as a no contest, or can I get that, stricken, and can we run it back? She's probably got the clearest, the biggest gripe right now. I'm surprised I haven't heard more from the mayor camp trying to get them to run it back, so, and the thing that gets me is, right, it makes your undisputed championship, it tarnishes it a little. It kind of puts an asterisk there, and it dirties it up, which is sad because I'm a Baumgartner fan.
Yeah, now our guy Lukey, who was on our platform before, he's got his own channel now, Lukey Boxing, who we still support to the fullest. He brought up a good point on his channel, so I wanted to plug it too. Is that part of Alicia's story that made her so easy to get behind is that she went from being a club fighter who wasn't on TV to becoming an undisputed champion in just a few years. And it sucks looking back on it now, where people can kind of say, oh, well, she was a club fighter back then. Is this what kind of changed the tide in her career? And is it unfair to say? Maybe, but you kind of lose the benefit of the doubt when you kind of pop for something like this. So does that mean that's all it was? I'm sure she put in a ton of hard work with Tony Harrison. I know that they did develop her into a much better fighter and a pound for pound level fighter. But as I just said, you kind of lose the benefit of the doubt once something like this does happen. I think people have the right to kind of start to question things, whether it ends up being true or not, because like you said, we don't have any official answers yet. It's still a win in her book, the last fight as of right now. We're just, like you said, it's all speculation at this point, and we're just forming an opinion on the information that's being presented to us, and that's all we can do.
Yeah, I think, and I want people to be clear, we'd be saying the same stuff if this was a guy, right? If this were, we were just talking about him, if this were Charlo or Canelo, and hell, when Canelo tested positive when he was eating the tainted meat in Mexico, right, people gave him hell. But this isn't a tainted meat situation, which is also a real thing. Anybody who's in any competitive sport, anytime they're going to go compete in Mexico, they tell you, don't eat the food because you can test dirty. It's real. They put steroids in the food. Look it up if you don't believe me. They also put albuterol in them. But anyway, they'll tell you, don't eat the meat down there. Canelo lives down there. He should have known better. But anyway, when he got caught for doing that, right, people gave him a hell, and it was later found out that, yeah, that's what it was. And you forgive, and he moved on. He hasn't come anywhere near testing dirty since then. This is a different situation, bro, because this isn't, and I don't know the exact amounts that were found. If these were just small traces, or is it possible she got it somewhere else? I don't know. But this fight wasn't in Mexico. This fight wasn't somewhere where this was something that could have been done on accident. Those two things in your system, they're probably being taken on purpose, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. I think we'll see. Maybe by the time we have our next show, we'll have some more answers for you guys on that. Because as of right now, these things all once they come out, it still takes time. And like I said, I mean, it was October, I think 6th or 7th that Connor Bennett popped, and we still don't know exactly what happened with that whole thing. I mean, we have a pretty damn good idea about that. He wasn't that he was at fault for that, but we still don't know the exact details behind it. So we shall see on that. So TJ and Backyard Prophet going back and forth a little bit. TJ, this is why we like TJ. We'll have him on the show at some point too. A great point, just to talk about Wilder with the skill set. He did win a bronze medal in the Olympics, so I think that's a pretty fair point to make too. And then Backyard Prophet, another fair point too, just saying he didn't say Wilder was completely unskilled, only that Ruiz and of course Usyk are more skilled. If he loops his left hook, AJ could stop him with the straight right. Fair points on both sides. I do think that Wilder, though his skills aren't up to par with some of the high-level guys, you win a bronze medal in the Olympics, you got some skills at the end of the day too. So I think that those are definitely fair points for both those guys. So I think we've touched on basically everything. Do you want to touch on that real quick, or anything else on the Baumgartner thing before we wrap things up? Or
What I'll say lastly about the Baumgartner thing is that um, I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that this is something that maybe was a mistake. Again, it didn't show up on her post fight. So you want to give people the benefit of the doubt anytime you can, and she's undisputed. I would hate for her belts to be taken from her outside of the ring. You know, and I hope that this doesn't affect her ability to feed her family. But if she tests dirt, if this is true, then whatever comes her way is it is what it is. On the Wilder Joshua thing, I'll say this, bro. You could say the loop and punches thing about every fighter he's ever fought,
Mhm.
and nobody has put him down and out outside of Fury, right? Who's probably going to go down as the best heavyweight fighter in our generation. You feel me? So if the only guy who's so far who's been able to take advantage of Wilder's deficiencies is the best guy in the division, and we can all agree, I think, that AJ is nowhere near as good a fighter as Fury, at least in my opinion. I don't, maybe you guys are drinking a different Kool Aid, but so yeah, he could, but the likelihood of him doing it, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think that Wilder is good enough. Plus, again, he only needs a split second. I mean, we've seen it over and over and over again. Even against the Fury, right? You see him. He needs a split second, and he's putting you on your ass. It's look. Um, I'll say it again though. I want to watch it.
Mhm.
We're all gonna watch it. Um, Nah, man, I think that's about it though. As far as I'm concerned, we might have missed something, but we'll run it back again.
Yeah, this is a great question. Shout out to Backyard Prophet for being here too. We'll touch on this really quick before we get out. I don't know if you saw the comments from Jessica McCaskill, where she had then retracted later because I think Eddie Hearn and his team were getting ready to put some legal notices out there about it. But she had made comments along the lines of, it's not an exact quote, kind of paraphrasing, but something I think along the lines of that because Baumgartner hasn't re-signed a long-term contract with Matchroom, that it was kind of something that Hearn and those guys had put out there. That's a hell of an accusation to put out there, basically saying that Hearn and those guys had either fucked around with the testing or something like that. I think someone else had put Frank Warren and said that, oh, rumors, oh, well, she was going to go sign with Jake Paul. So Eddie Hearn kind of did this. I know that McCaskill then retracted the statement saying that everything I said was untrue because I think Eddie Hearn, he's been around the game. So I think he knows, okay, if you make a comment like that, I'm going to come for you legally, which he would have a right to do at that point. So I think it's a hell of a comment by McCaskill. If anything from that ever comes out to be true, then clearly Eddie Hearn and those guys would have whatever coming. They would deserve whatever comes to them, and that would be such a shame if you were to do that to a fighter. I'd like to believe that that's not true, but obviously, like we said, we don't really know at the end of the day. And I know, just lastly, a lot of people touched on just Alicia's physique and saying just because the way her body looks that she is definitely dirty. But she also posted a picture of when she was 7 years old, I think, in a wrestling competition, and she looked pretty jacked up at 7 years old. So I think just she was blessed with great genetics too. So not to say that that helps or hurts her case, but I think that's kind of a non-factor in this whole issue. But did you see McCaskill's comments at all or anything to say? Because those are, even at Eddie Hearn said, those are some wild accusations to kind of throw around that basically a promoter is upset that someone's not re-signing and they're kind of putting this out there.
I did. And, I didn't really put a lot of weight into it, if I'm being honest with you. Like, I think whenever stuff like this comes out, when it's, there's something about doping that comes out, and, no matter what the results are, good or bad, people are going to have something to say. But especially when it comes out that, there was a dirty one, now there's a clean one, it looks suspicious, right? So, you expect this kind of thing, but I don't know, bro. I don't know if they're messing with the results. I do know it wasn't VADA testing, it wasn't the Olympic testing. So, it I forget what the name of the actual
I forget.
agency was. It was Drug Free Sports. So I guess that's
Okay.
something that Matchroom uses, but it wasn't VADA who most people respect and use. So who knows, right? This is I'm not really too familiar with Drug Free Sport or how and great their testing is. So we'll have to look into that a little bit further. Maybe if it were VADA or one of the bigger organizations, the Olympic testing, then you could say, okay, this is a little bit more legit. So again, because of all those things, we kind of want to give this the time it deserves to investigations to happen and figure out what's what.
Exactly, because like we said before, we're just giving our thoughts on the information that's presented to us. But even Alicia, she's innocent until proven guilty. So we got to see until they can prove it. And then for Jessica McCaskill also, I mean, you got to wonder too, because she's fighting on an Eddie Hearn card in September against Sandy Ryan on the Richardson Hitchens Jose Zepeda undercard. So as far as I'm concerned, she better win all 10 rounds if she wants to win a decision after those comments she made too. So she better be careful with that. And if those comments ever do hold any weight and are true, I would hope Eddie Hearn would lose his promoter's license and would be locked out of the sport for a long time. But like you said, we don't really know exactly. There's still more questions than answers at this point. So we hope within these next few episodes, we have more clarity for you guys on that. But that's all we got for now. So Nibs, any last comments or anything? It was a hell of another show. Episode 4 is basically behind us at this point. And kind of any last comments or anything that you think the fans should look forward to going forward?
I say it every time. Go to your local shows. Support the guys that we don't get to see on TV. Support the women we don't get to see on TV. Support your local gyms if they hold fundraisers. Take your kids out, get them interested in the sport. But support the guys that are busting their asses for next to nothing, or nothing at all in some of these club level fights, because those guys, like we alluded to, Baumgartner went from being a nobody to an undisputed champion, right? Regardless of what the test is. Somebody had to support her along the way. Somebody had to give her, a girl. Somebody had to, feed the machine, right? Feed the machine. Go out, support your local shows. I know, Jack, you go out to a lot of events out there. We got a lot more events out here locally in Arizona. And, I'm looking forward to going out to Texas to a couple of events myself. Again, later on, at the end of this year, maybe next year. So just support your local fighters. They all need it. And, Floyd Mayweather even had to start somewhere. So
Yeah, perfect too. And I'll actually touch on really quickly just the local card I was at last Friday, August 11th. There was a Grand Chin Promotions card at Veteran Memorial Stadium in Quincy, Massachusetts. Michael Hand Jr., who's a really good friend of mine, picked up a huge win over Harry Gigliotti, someone who I also know who's a very, very game fighter. So that was a great New England matchup between two top 140 guys in the area. So to see a club show where two guys who are normally A-side guys going against each other was great. They had a great co-main event where Julian Baptiste was in against Jameer Jones for the Massachusetts state middleweight title. Baptiste was knocked down in the first round, looked like he was on his way out, came back and then knocked out Jones cold with a huge overhand right in the sixth round. So I saw two classic club show fights back to back, which is always great. The atmosphere was great. And then Frank the Tank Hogan, who's now 15-0 with 14 knockouts. Thomas O'Toole, who I know is now 8-0. Gabriel Morales, Luke Iannichilli. And even on the amateur show, there's this kid, this guy Shaquille Mayer, who I know. This lady Jen Perella, who also is in the gym with a lot of those guys. So great show overall. So I think all those guys have very bright future. So it's great. And as Nibs always says, support your local boxing, because I've never been to a local show and haven't felt like I've gotten my money's worth. Last Friday was without a doubt the best show I've seen in person, so I was really happy to be a part of it. It always helps when you know 5 people and they all win, so I went 5-0 on the night too. That never hurts either. So, and shout out to everybody in the chat.
We're winners here.
Yes, as always. So
Catch and Counter, the authority in all things boxing.
Without a doubt, I like it. We might have to clip that and make it an intro or something like that. But shout out to everybody in the chat. We got Samuel Robles. TJ's back in here. Backyard Prophet saying thank you guys for a great show. He'll be back. Well, we hope you're back because you brought a lot of great insight in too. And then TJ wrapping up saying Kurt Scobie coming up soon on the Zone. That's right. That's on the Overtime the Zone card. I'm actually going to turn that on as soon as I'm off. He got the huge knockout over Hank Lundy in his last fight. Huge. He's the guy at 140 who looks like a damn middleweight in there. So that is he's a huge 140 guy. I cannot wait to see. And then the last comment, salute to my homie Jahan Ingram with TMT. Yo, this is somebody to watch out for. I don't know if you guys remember the sparring video of when Rolly got knocked out in sparring, but this is who knocked him out in sparring. I know that's people don't like to talk about that as much, but that was out there for the world to see. Everyone knows that's who it was. So very, very sharp puncher, very, very skilled guy. So 100% salute to him, because he is going to be an absolute horse. Or an absolute, as reading here, the horseman thinks I got mixed up, but an absolute force going forward. So shout out to Jahan Ingram. Shout out to all you guys in the chat. Shout out to you, Nibs. Another hell of another episode. So
hey, really quickly too to shout out John Ingram and the TMT family. TMT puts on a lot of cards out there at at Sam's Casino out there in Vegas. It's off the strip a little bit. If you're ever in Vegas, you want to catch some good entertainment for not a blockbuster price. TMT puts on a lot of fight cards because Mayweather's out there, and he's got a trove of young talent coming up. I think you guys will, if you're ever in Vegas and want to catch a good boxing show when there's not a big fight card weekend, go check them out.
Without a doubt. So that is it for episode 4 of Catching Conor with Jack and Nibs. We will be on Fridays at 9 o'clock. Check out our Instagram page at ITR Boxing. Facebook is Inside the Ropes, and also our OnlyFans page at onlyfans.com/ITR Boxing. If we ever have any adjustments in the scheduling or anything, you guys will see it there first. We'll also post it on the YouTube, but the social media pages are where we get that out first. And if there's any changes in the timing or the days of the shows, but it should be Fridays, 9 p.m. going forward. So Nibs, or 9 p.m. Eastern time, I should say, going forward. 6 p.m. West Coast time for you guys over there. But hell of another episode. Salute to you. Salute to everybody in the chat. And we will see y'all next Friday.
My man, Jay.
Yes, sir. We did it once again.